All right, so get this. We're going deep on evaluating instruction today.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, you sent over topic 12, evaluating instruction, and wow, there's a lot to unpack.
Definitely.
It's not just about giving grades. This is about really seeing if teaching is working. Like, is it making a difference?
You hit the nail on the head. It's way more complex than people think.
For sure.
We toss around words like evaluation and assessment, even testing, as if they're all the same.
Yeah, it's like education has its own language sometimes.
Right. But they all have their own meanings,
So break it down for us. What's the difference?
Okay, so think of evaluation as the big picture, like judging how effective instruction is overall.
Okay, big picture, got it.
Then you have assessment, which is about gathering information on what students are learning.
Makes sense. So how does measurement fit in?
Measurement goes a step further. It's about putting numbers to that learning, like giving it a grade. And then testing, that's just one way we measure, often using specific tools or exams.
So it's more than just seeing if a student can remember facts for a test.
Exactly. We want to understand the whole learning journey.
Interesting.
What did they know before we started teaching? How are they doing as we go along? And in the end, did they reach those learning goals?
That makes sense.
And that's where these three phases of evaluation come in. Pre-assessment, formative evaluation, and summative evaluation.
3 phases. Okay. Can you give us an example of what each one looks like in a real classroom?
Sure. Imagine a teacher. They're about to start a new unit, let's say fractions.
Okay, fractions.
Before they jump in, they might give a quick pre-assessment.
Like a pop quiz.
It could be, or even just a few questions, just to get a feel for what the students already know.
So the teacher knows where to start.
Exactly. It helps them tailor their teaching to what the students need.
Smart. So what about formative evaluation? When does that happen?
Formative evaluation happens while you're teaching. You're monitoring student learning as you go.
So checking in along the way.
Yes. It might be observing them during group work, looking over drafts of their writing, or asking some well-placed questions to check their understanding.
So it's less about the final grade and more about helping them master the material as they go.
That's it.
And then I'm guessing summative evaluation is like the final test, right?
You got it. Summative evaluation happens at the end, like a unit test or a big project.
To see what they've learned.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did they achieve the learning goals? And it gives them feedback on their progress.
Gotcha. So we've got these different phases of evaluation, but how do we actually measure learning within those phases? Is it always about comparing students to each other?
That's a great question. And that's where norm-referenced and criterion-referenced measurement come in.
2 different ways to measure, okay?
Think of a race.
A race.
Yeah. In a norm-referenced race, you're trying to beat everyone else.
Okay, I get that. Like, who's the fastest?
Right. You're judged based on the norm, the average performance of the group.
I see.
But in a criterion-referenced race, you're focused on hitting a specific time no matter how others do.
Interesting. So it's you against the clock, not against other people.
Yes. You're measured against a predetermined criterion.
Okay, so how does this race thing connect to the classroom?
Well, sometimes we do want to know how students stack up against their classmates.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's when we use norm-reference tests, like those standardized achievement tests. They tell us who's at the top, middle, and who might be struggling.
Right, like a ranking system.
But those tests can also lead to some unhealthy competition and anxiety, making students feel pressured to outperform each other.
Yeah, I can see that. Instead of just focusing on their own learning, they're worried about being better than everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. So when would we use criterion-referenced measurement then?
Well, when is it more about just meeting a specific standard?
It's all about mastery with criterion-referenced assessments.
Like proving you know the stuff.
Think of a driving test. You're not trying to be a better driver than anyone else. You just have to show you can drive safely.
Right, you just need to pass.
In the classroom, this could be using checklists, rubrics, or even student-created portfolios, anything that shows they've met those learning objectives.
I like that it seems more focused on individual growth.
Absolutely.
This makes me think about how we measure learning in different subjects and skills. It's not just about memorizing facts, right?
Yeah, right. It's not just about facts. How do we assess things like creativity or teamwork?
Exactly.
That's where the different domains of learning come in.
Domains.
We learn in 3 main domains: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor.
Okay, I think I've had those terms before, but remind me what they mean.
Sure. The cognitive domain is all about knowledge and thinking skills, like remembering facts, applying concepts, analyzing information.
Got it. The thinking stuff.
Then you have the affective domain. that focuses on attitudes, values, emotions, like appreciating diversity, showing empathy, developing a love of learning.
Okay, so more about feelings and attitudes.
And lastly, the psychomotor domain. That's all about physical skills and coordination. Things like playing an instrument, dancing, or using tools well.
Ah, so the doing part of learning.
Precisely. And it really emphasizes that we need a variety of ways to assess students. Traditional tests alone can't capture the whole picture of learning.
That makes total sense.
We need to look at the whole student, their intellectual, emotional, and physical development. And that's a lot to consider.
It is. So tell me more about, this makes me think about performance-based assessment, getting students to show what they know.
Yeah, it's a great way to go beyond traditional tests.
Right, like give them a chance to really demonstrate their learning, make it more engaging too, right?
Absolutely. It's about giving them opportunities that are authentic, more real world,
Exactly. So instead of just answering multiple choice questions about coding, they could actually build a website or an app.
Right. Or instead of memorizing historical facts, they might design a museum exhibit or even write a play about it.
Oh, I love that. Way more exciting than filling out a bubble sheet, that's for sure. And I bet it makes them feel more invested in their learning.
You're exactly right. It gives them a sense of ownership.
Makes it more personal.
Yes, and they get to show their understanding in a way that really means something to them.
And connects to their interests and goals.
Plus, it often involves things like collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving.
Skills they need in the real world.
Exactly. Essential skills for the 21st century.
You mentioned in your notes that you're really into project-based learning. Does that tie into performance-based assessment?
Oh, absolutely. Project-based learning is a perfect example of performance-based assessment in action.
How so?
Well, students work together on these big, real-world projects. They have to use their knowledge and skills to make it happen.
So it's not just theoretical, they're applying what they've learned.
Exactly. And often these projects end with some kind of presentation.
So they can share what they've learned.
Right. They get to present to a wider audience. It's really cool to see.
This reminds me of something we talked about earlier about how evaluation goes beyond the classroom.
Oh, right.
We've got those district, state, even national and international assessments. Where do those fit in?
Those help us see the bigger picture of how students are doing.
Zoom out a bit.
Yes. We can spot trends, see where the curriculum might need some changes. They can even inform educational policy decisions.
So it's kind of like looking at the forest instead of just the individual trees. You get a broader perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And while standardized tests get a lot of criticism.
Yeah, they have their downsides.
They can be useful,
In what way?
They can give us valuable data points when we use them thoughtfully.
Yeah.
But it's important to use them along with other forms of assessment, not just rely on them solely.
It's about getting a more complete picture.
Absolutely.
We've been talking a lot about how students are evaluated, but teachers are evaluated too, right?
That's a great point. It's a crucial part of ensuring quality instruction.
For sure. So how does that process work?
Well, it involves gathering information about what the teacher is doing in the classroom.
Okay, so observing them.
It could be observations, yeah. But also things like student surveys. The teacher reflecting on their own practices, even looking at student work.
Lots of different ways to gather information.
Then you analyze that information and provide feedback.
Feedback for the teacher to improve.
Exactly.
So what's the main goal of teacher evaluation? Is it mostly about holding teachers accountable, or is there more to it?
Ideally, it's about both accountability and growth.
Okay, both.
We want to make sure teachers are meeting professional standards, that they're teaching effectively.
Right, making sure they're doing their job well.
But we also want to help them get better at what they do, support their professional development,
Makes sense. It's not just about pointing out flaws, it's about helping them grow.
Exactly.
But I imagine finding that balance between accountability and growth can be tricky.
Oh, it definitely can be.
What are some of the challenges in creating a good evaluation system for teachers?
Well, a big one is making sure those evaluations are fair, objective,
Right, so it's not biased.
and that they're focused on helping teachers improve.
It's not about punishing them.
Exactly. We don't want it to feel like a gotcha system,
I get it. It should be supportive,
It should be. We need to build a culture of trust and collaboration.
where teachers feel safe.
Yes, safe to grow and improve.
It sounds like that requires a real shift in mindset.
It does.
Moving away from evaluation as something that's done to teachers and more like something that's done with them.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So how do we create that kind of culture?
Well, communication is key.
Being open and honest.
Transparency, too, and meaningful feedback. Teachers need to know what they're being judged on.
The criteria.
Right. They need to feel like they have a say in the process.
Huh.
And the feedback they get needs to be specific, something they can actually act on.
Something that helps them grow.
Exactly.
Yeah. This makes me wonder, have we maybe relied too much on standardized tests?
Interesting point.
As a way to judge both students and teachers.
I see what you're saying.
What about alternative assessments? Could those play a bigger role in teacher evaluation?
I think they absolutely could.
Yeah.
Alternative assessments give you a more well-rounded picture of a teacher's effectiveness.
More than just a test score.
Right. For example, looking at student portfolios, seeing how a teacher leads a project-based learning activity, those can tell you so much about their teaching skills.
You get to see them in action.
And how they engage students. It's powerful stuff.
So maybe it's time to diversify those tools we're using to evaluate.
I think so.
Move beyond just focusing on those standardized tests.
We need a more comprehensive approach, something that really puts the learner at the center. Couldn't agree more. We need to remember that learning is complex. It can't be measured by just one test score. By using different assessment methods, by focusing on how students and teachers are growing,
We create a better system for everyone.
a more equitable and effective system
Yeah.
for all.
This has been a really insightful conversation about the many sides of evaluation in education. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From defining basic terms to talking about the different domains of learning, the ins and outs of student and teacher evaluation. It's fascinating.
It is, isn't it?
As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, one question comes to mind. What do you think the future holds for evaluation in education? Where do we go from here? How can we keep evolving these approaches to better serve both students and educators?
Wow, that really is something to think about. What a great question to end on. What do you see as the future of evaluation?
Well, one thing that really excites me is the focus on personalized learning these days.
Personalized learning, yeah.
As we get more data about individual students, like their strengths, needs, learning styles, we can make assessments that really fit them.
You mean like assessments that are tailored to each student?
Exactly. Imagine if every student had their own learning path, and assessments were used to not just measure progress, but to actually guide and support that journey. That would be amazing. Everyone learning at their own pace, in their own way.
Right. And I think technology is going to play a huge role in making that happen.
Technology, of course.
We're already seeing these adaptive learning platforms pop up. You know, the ones that change the difficulty in the content based on how the student is doing.
Oh, yeah. In real time.
Exactly. So students get personalized feedback and they're challenged at just the right level. Keeps them engaged too.
That's really cool. And it seems like that could help with some of the challenges we talked about, like teachers not having enough time to do more complex assessments.
Definitely. If technology can take over some of the grading and data analysis, teachers have more time to spend with each student.
More time to focus on what matters.
And to come up with creative ways to teach. Which brings me to artificial intelligence.
AI, the big buzzword these days.
Yeah. People are talking about AI grading essays, even giving personalized feedback.
It sounds pretty futuristic. What are your thoughts on AI in education?
I think it has huge potential, but we need to be careful.
Careful how?
Well, AI is great at analyzing tons of data and spotting patterns.
Makes sense.
But we can't forget that learning is a human thing.
Right. It's not all about data.
It's about creativity, critical thinking, social emotional skills, all those things that AI can't really measure.
So we need to make sure AI is used in a way that helps teachers, not replaces them.
Exactly. We need that human touch.
We don't want algorithms making decisions about students' futures without any human input. That's a little scary, honestly.
It is a bit, yeah. Finding the right balance, you know.
Between the power of technology and the importance of the human element.
That's the key. Absolutely. And we need to keep talking about the ethical side of using AI in education.
Ethics for sure.
We need to make sure those algorithms aren't biased and that all students have access to these technologies.
Equal opportunities for everyone.
That's the goal.
It's clear that the future of evaluation is full of exciting potential, but there are definitely some important things to consider.
No doubt about it.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm struck by how important evaluation is to every part of education.
It really is.
From a single student's learning journey to the whole education system, you've given us so much to think about, not just how we evaluate learning, but how we value it.
Well, thank you. It's been great discussing these important and complex topics with you.
Likewise, I hope our listeners got some new ideas from this conversation.
Me too. And I hope they remember that evaluation isn't just about measuring what students have learned, but about understanding how they learn, and then using that knowledge to create the best learning experiences possible.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we'll wrap things up for today. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive on evaluating instruction.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.